Penn State, Ohio State, the return of Chase Young. Now, here's my question. He's been gone for 3 weeks. He posted on Instagram. He said, my chip on my shoulder has only gotten bigger. He has a lot to prove. So without playing in 3 weeks, do you expect any rust from him, or should Penn State be very scared?
No, Penn State should be scared. Sean Clifford, we saw him use his legs a lot last week in their win over Indiana. He's going to have to continue to keep using his legs because this guy is going to want to prove to everyone that he is no doubt the best player in college football, and he's been impactful versus better offensive lines. Let's be honest, this Penn State front has struggled at times. If you go back to their loss versus Minnesota, at times you saw pressure from that group that is nowhere close to what Ohio State will present up front. So this is not only an issue for their personnel and how Penn State matches up versus Chase Young and the rest of the Ohio State defensive front. This is a scheme issue. It's going to impact, it's going to affect everything they do on offense because they have to be accountable for this young man in their protection schemes and then their run blocking schemes. So this is going to be everything in this game. And I want to shed a little bit of light on Penn State because they also have some good edge rushers. Shaka Toney, Gross Matos as well. Those guys can get after opposing quarterbacks. They will challenge this Ohio State offensive line, but this offensive line from Ohio State has already been challenged this year. Michigan State with Kenny Wilkes, one of the better rushers in the Big Ten. We saw Wisconsin Group 2 that's got two pretty solid outside linebackers who can rush off of the edge. So even though this is all going to be about Chase Young, Penn State's got some guys, too, that may surprise you. You may hear their name called next year in the first round of next year's draft.
All right, so from one good player to another, the return of Chase Young. Let's talk a little bit about Heisman and Justin Fields. Joe Burrow has been running away with it the past couple of weeks. I mean, by far. Can he make the case this weekend? Justin Fields, can he make an argument? Is this his Heisman moment?
You got to have a moment. And then that's the thing is, to your point, he has not had that moment yet. This is that opportunity for him. He's got Penn State, a top 10 ranked team. He's going to have Michigan after that. Who knows how high they'll continue to run up in the polls and the rankings. They have to play Indiana this week. This could potentially be his moment because he's got the stats that are comparable to Joe Burrow. I believe he's got 41 total touchdowns accounted for, including passing and rushing, and only 1 interception. So because of that, it just now comes down to that moment. And honestly, this may be a situation where it's not even his fault. This team's been so dominant that he hasn't been put in the position where he's got to lead them back in the fourth quarter for a game-winning drive or has to be clutch. They just might very well be that dominant. So it might be some of those highlight reel plays that we see that come in the second quarter, third quarter versus good opponents, even though Ohio State may win by 3 touchdowns in the game.
I don't think Justin Fields is the Ohio State player that has the best chance of at least making it to New York City as a Heisman Trophy finalist. I think that in these final 2 games, spotlight games, the final 3 games, let's include the Big Ten Championship, I think Chase Young, returning from suspension, if he gets right back to playing at the level that we saw against Wisconsin, then that same Heisman Trophy dark horse buzz is going to continue to proliferate across the entire country. Remember, Heisman voters, they get 3 votes. That's it. They don't get 5, but they get 3. And oftentimes when we've got a player, a defensive player that can just impact the game single-handedly in a way that we have not seen in years, and I think that's exactly what we have with Chase Young, he's going to catch some second and third place votes. I don't know if he's going to catch number 1. Heisman Trophy voters still love their quarterbacks. No offense to the quarterbacks that we have right here. But I think that Chase Young is more likely to end up as a Heisman Trophy finalist than Justin Fields. And I think that this spotlight game could be a big moment for him as well.
The one thing I'm going to disagree with you on there, Chip, is just saying I actually think they both have a really good chance of going, and in some part because of what Joe Burrow's done. He's been so good versus so many top 10 teams this year that you're basically looking at giving him the award. He's going to be the winner, but then everyone else kind of pales into comparison because of his resume so far. So that not only one provides kind of this, well, who else would I vote for? Justin Fields has been very good from a statistical standpoint. And again, his resume has been pretty solid too. It's just he hasn't gotten the same type of love that Joe Burrow has. And obviously Chase Young, because he's such an impactful player and he is going to be the best overall prospect in next year's draft. So there's a really strong chance that both could be in attendance and then are watching Joe Burrow hoist up the Heisman Trophy at the end of the year.
All right, we've got to talk about the spread on this game because it's huge. And for me, I was stunned when I saw this. As of right now, it is Ohio State favored by 18. Now, keep in mind, the last 3 meetings between these 2 teams have been decided by 3 points or less. The last 2 games have been decided by 1 point. So, Chip, when you look at this, I mean, Penn State, it is a top 10 team. Is this line out of control, or do you think it's reasonable?
It's reasonable, and I think I'm going to lay it with the Buckeyes, Amanda.
Oh.
I mean, they're like, Penn State has some good guys. Penn State has some elite players, but Ohio State's got a whole roster full of them. I mean, this Buckeyes team, if anything, if they don't cover this spread, I'm going to look at it and I'm going to predict that is because Ohio State got in its own way. I'm talking about Justin Fields with maybe a couple turnovers, maybe a couple blown assignments, maybe a couple mental mistakes. Because on a down-to-down basis, Penn State has been very good at playing winning football when they need to. But they have not overwhelmed many opponents the way that Ohio State has overwhelmed every opponent on its schedule. I think this is a game where Penn State, it might have it close for a quarter. I mean, heck, even Miami of Ohio was up 5-0 against Ohio State. It's just the Buckeyes went on to win 76-5. Now, I don't think it's going to be 76-5, but I do think that a slow first quarter, we're going to hit the second quarter explosion, and then the Buckeyes end up winning this thing by 3 touchdowns at the end.
I've got a couple concerns for Penn State. The first is their secondary. They've really given up some big plays. You look a couple weeks ago in their loss versus Minnesota, that was very obvious. But really the entire season, their pass defense is the weak point of this defense. Even as good as their rush is, or as athletic as they are, in particular the linebacker spot with a guy like Micah Parsons. So that's going to be the test, because I do think there's going to be some plays out there to be made for Justin Fields in this very talented, fast wide receiver group for Ohio State that's probably been underestimated when you look at the landscape of college football and all the other wide receiver groups we tend to talk about. This game is going to be won and lost, though, on the offensive line of Ohio State. If they can run the football, J.K. Dobbins along with Justin Fields, which is a tough tandem to stop. But if Ohio State can run the football, look out. That's where this game gets completely out of hand. That's where you see the 18-point spread come into play, because I do think Penn State's going to have a really hard time trying to find separation of big plays like we've seen from K.J. Hamler, who, look, is battling a hamstring injury. Don't even know how healthy he'll potentially be for this game. Dotson's got some speed, too, along with Kane, some of the other players. But so does Ohio State. I mean, this is as talented of a team as you'll see. So I think it's going to be tough for Penn State to score points. And I think Ohio State may have an easier time with some of those big plays we saw Minnesota take advantage of, with a very talented and very, very tough group to be able to stop both running and throwing the football.
And to bring this full circle, Sean Clifford is in so much trouble. She is in so much trouble in this game. Chase Young is going to be playing with his hair on fire, and it's very possible that he could single-handedly take over this game. We've seen not only in the loss to Minnesota, but even against Indiana. I mean, Sean Clifford is able to make some plays with his feet, but man, he is really starting to struggle with his completion percentage, and Penn State is not consistent with the passing attack. If they start facing 3rd and long and Ohio State is able to tee off, I think that Clifford is going to be in for another tough day under center for Penn State.
Keep an eye on Freifogel, their tight end. You know, he's a guy they kind of compare to Rob Gronkowski. I don't know if he's exactly the same, but more Ryan's people at Penn State of Mike Gesicki, a really good athlete. He's going to be key, I think, for Clifford. But as Chip noted, this is a Cincinnati boy. This is a St. X guy. He didn't get recruited by Ohio State, so there's a lot of the line for him, too, personally, I think maybe emotionally. So you got to wonder how he handles those emotions going into Columbus, having to play an Ohio State team with that big chip on his shoulder for him not being recruited by these Buckeyes.
All right, regardless, it's going to be a very fun game to watch.
Barton Simmons, Chip Patterson jump aboard. Let's talk a little college football. Let's start with that Penn State-Ohio State game. Chip, I'll start with you. 18 and 56.5 is the total. So I don't think Penn State's getting to 20, and I think Ohio State's getting close to 40. What do you want to do with this?
I want to take Ohio State, and I'll take it all the way up to 21. So if the public jumps on board, which, as we know, anytime you take Ohio State, you are running along with all the buck nuts across the country that are going to be on the very public Ohio State Buckeyes side. But this 18, I think, is a sucker play because Penn State has a few players that might be able to play for Ohio State, but Ohio State's entire roster is just on a different level. And Penn State, we have seen so far this year, play some good winning football. I mean, even in its one loss on the road at Minnesota, they were right in that game until that Sean Clifford interception. But I just don't think that that team is all that impressive when you stack it up to a team of future pros all over the place, because we're going to see Chase Young eat against Sean Clifford and this Penn State offense. They're not going to be able to do anything. And what does Penn State struggle at? They struggle in their defensive backs. They struggle stopping the deep pass. And so that's where even if Justin Fields and J.K. Dobbins are bottled up a little bit by Penn State's good defensive front and Penn State's good rush defense. I think they're going to be giving up explosive plays through the passing game. You know, Chase Young is licking his chops to get back into it after that 2-game suspension. And so I just don't know how many points Penn State's going to score. And even if it's slow, and we've seen this with Ohio State, right? I mean, they were down 5-0 to Miami of Ohio. They've had a couple of first quarters that they're a little bit sluggish with. Boom, they hit the gas in the second quarter. I think we see the same thing here. And Penn State, a close game becomes a not close game real quick. Give me the Buckeyes.
Yeah, the cream rises to the top this year. It has. I mean, remember at one point in the season we were talking about 8 or 9 teams we felt like could compete for a national championship. Then that list got trimmed a little bit to 6 or 7, 5 or 6. For a while, Penn State was within that mix. But as the seasons progressed, as we've gotten a bigger body of work from the Nittany Lions, we've seen a few of their flaws. We've seen the reason why they've struggled early in the season a couple of times. To this point, we haven't seen the Ohio State flaw. And that national championship contending list is probably down to only 3 teams. And I think the top team on that list is Ohio State. That is the best team in college football, the most complete team in college football, a team that can defend against the vertical explosive plays while still getting disruptive plays defensively, a team that can hurt you in the run game. But if you take that away, like Chip mentioned, they've got the dudes to go down the field and hit you in the pass game as well. This is an Ohio State team that gets Chase Young back on defense. This is an Ohio State team that's basically gone through a couple of scrimmages the last 2 games with Maryland and Rutgers. And now there's an Ohio State team that's going to be very focused for this Penn State squad coming in, who is really good, has some really good players, but doesn't have the consistency play in, play out, the efficiency play in, play out, I think, to keep pace with Ohio State. So you might see a half of competitive football, but over 4 quarters, just like over this season, I think you're going to see the cream rise in this one. I think you're going to see Ohio State cover.